Hi guys, it's RBB. Today in Photoshop, I'd like to talk to you about adjustment layers and how we can change some of the attributes of our images. So I got this picture off of Pexels, so I'm using a copyright-free image, and it's obviously got some fun little details that might be fun to play with, so this is the one we're going to use. So to work as non-destructively as possible, of course I always want to duplicate my background, so I'm going to right click as always and duplicate that layer so I can keep my background safe. Okay, so the adjustment layers are located down here in the layers menu in this little black and white cookie. And when I click on the adjustment layers, I see that I've got a lot of choices. Okay, and we're not going to go over all of these because that would take a really long time. I'm just going to show you a few that are very helpful and probably the most common that you're going to want to use. Let's start with hue and saturation. So if I want to change the color or the saturation, the fullness of the color, I want to work on the hue and saturation. So if I just left click on this, Photoshop's going to create this hue and saturation adjustment layer. It's its own layer, which is great, non-destructive. I can always just change my mind without affecting my actual layer. So in hue and saturation, what this white square is telling me is that every pixel in my image is active. Okay, it's an alpha channel, and it's basically saying this hue and saturation adjustment layer is linked to every pixel in my picture. Okay, so if we go up to hue right here, we can adjust this and adjust the hue slider, and it's going to adjust all kinds of things. Like, look at our trees are going all kinds of crazy colors. And yes, of course, our beetles changing colors. Okay. So we can adjust the color this way. We can adjust the saturation and make everything look very bright, or we can turn it down and make it very gray, or all the way down and make it black and white. Okay, so this one is pretty common to want to change the color of something or change the saturation of something. So that's what hue and saturation does. I'm gonna saturate this a bit, make it really bright. Now, how the adjustment layers work is it's top down. So basically, if this is on top, it's affecting everything below it. If I were to move it above or below, it's going to affect what's below it. Okay, let's look at another adjustment layer. Let's make a couple in the stack here. We could look at brightness and contrast because that may be something that you would want to change, like change the brightness. Okay, it's sort of blown out, kind of exposure blown out here. Or the contrast, okay, that slider. Now, I don't find this very helpful. It's a little ham-fisted to me. So I'm going to say, I don't like this one. I'm going to click on this layer and throw it in the trash. Okay, and I haven't affected my background image at all. Okay, the one that I would suggest you use if you want to change brightness and contrast is curves. Now, curves seems a little complicated and a little scary because there's a lot of choices. I can work in shadows and highlights and midtones and do all kinds of crazy stuff. I can also work in different channels. In the RGB, the whole RGB, I can work in red or green or blue. But right now I'm going to work on the whole main master channel. And you can see that in this image, what this histogram is showing me is that I've got a lot of midtones, a decent amount of shadows, and not a lot of bright highlights. And this line right here is telling me I have the full gamut from the blackest blacks to the brightest whites. Okay, I'm allowed to have everything from 0 to 100. Now, I can adjust this. I can click on this line and sort of grab it and pull it like a spider web. And it's affecting how much of these pixels are going to fall, like in the midtones, in the highlights. Okay, I can move this around. But that may be a little confusing to you. What I like to do with hue and saturation is right here, if I grab this top white marker and I move it slightly to the left, my image is going to get brighter because what I'm doing is I'm telling Photoshop anything beyond this point in white, just slam it up to white, make it bright. And I like to take the black marker and do the same thing, move that anchor over to the right a little bit. So basically anything darker than, say, 85% slams down to black. So it creates a really high contrast look. And I like that. It's what is called a bleach bypass look. And I could go back to my hue and saturation layer and desaturate a little bit. And you get sort of, it's a cool high contrast look called a bleach bypass look, and I like that. Okay, so there you go. There's a couple adjustment layers. You can try different ones and see what they do. Hue and saturation is probably going to be very helpful. Curves is helpful. Exposure, if your picture is a little too bright or too dark, you can do some changes with exposure. Okay, and just play with these others and see what you like. Every time you click on one, it will make a new layer. Now let's look at something else a little cooler, because we're at 5 minutes, so I think we got a little time to do something. Let's say I don't want to affect the whole layer. I just want to change the color of this car. So we're getting a little bit into selection tools, but it's also working with adjustment layers. So I'm going to click on my background copy, make sure that I am on the right layer, because that's the #1 mistake in Photoshop, is working on the wrong layer. And any Photoshop professional will tell you, yes, that is the #1 error that we make forever, is working on the wrong layer. So I'm going to grab that background layer. Now, selecting this Volkswagen, we have a lot of options, but the tools in Photoshop have been getting better and better at just like selecting an object with one click. It's pretty miraculous. So I'm going to use the tool set over here on the left-hand side, and I'm going to choose the object selection tool. Now, you might notice that there's sort of a new bar down here that says select subject. That one works pretty well, but not as, I think this one works better. So I'm going to do object selection tool. Now, when I move on to my image, Photoshop is going to guess what the objects are. So when I move, it grabbed all of sort of the background, like, oh, I think this is an object. I think the street is an object. So it's recognizing that this is a separate object. That's so crazy. I guess it tells by focus and similar pixels and whatever. I don't know how the magic is working, but there we go. So see my marching ants? It didn't get it perfectly because the tires turned into shadow, but you know what? For this, it's close enough for government work, right? So this right now, all I did was left click on this object and it pretty much got the whole car. That's pretty amazing. Okay, so if I only want to play with what's inside the marching ants, let's say I only want to do an adjustment layer on what's in those marching ants, I can take this layer right here and this selection and simply click on this little Japanese flag that says it's a mask. Notice that it's right here as well. I can make a selection with this with that selection. Now what happened is now my background image is linked to only those pixels that are inside those marching ants. So all this area of black, the whole rest of the city is not being affected, just what's inside the marching ants. Okay, so that's pretty cool. So now if I grab this background copy and I add an adjustment layer here and do hue and saturation, okay, it's affecting what's below it. Now, I had a hue and saturation. We already did that, RBB. We already changed that, right? This is changing. Look, it's changing the whole city. What are you talking about? What was the point of selecting that car? This hue and saturation right here, I want to affect only this layer. So if you hold Alt or Option on a Mac and you move your mouse right between the two layers, hold Alt and Option, you see this little icon show up with an arrow. If I left click, this selection is linked to this layer, and this layer is only active in that little alpha channel there. So this little hue and saturation guy right here is only going to affect my car. Okay, awesome. So if you want to change the color of somebody's outfit, or you want to see what does your house look like a different color, or change somebody's makeup or whatever, let's give them this lime green car. Let's desaturate it a little bit so it's not quite so cuckoo looking. Okay, so this hue and saturation, and I can click on the name and label it. This one is car, and this one is maybe the whole city. So this one, because it's not linked, is affecting everything below it. This one, because it is linked, is only affecting that layer. Because when you have a stack of 40 or 50 different layers, sometimes you want adjustment layers to affect a couple of layers, but not all of them. So you would link them. If you want to unlink it, you'd actually do the exact same thing. I hold Alt or Option on a Mac, and now my icon has a no, like a link with a line through it, and I can simply unlink them, and now that adjustment layer is affecting everything. So I'm going to link that one back. Now it's just affecting, it's linked to the one below it. Okay, so you can make selections quickly make a mask and change the whole picture, or just change individual parts. So take a little time and play with the adjustment layers and see what they do. Don't be afraid of them. I would say learn curves, and hue and saturation is going to do most everything you want. Photo filter's cool, but what I would rather you do is know what that photo filter is doing and dial it in yourself. I always want you to know what's going on under the hood. Okay? So play around with this, have fun. The cool thing is that we're non-destructive. So if I change my mind on this one, I can always just poke it in the eye and turn it off. Okay? Or if I decide I really hate it, I can grab this layer and throw it away, and I'm not affecting my layers underneath. Okay, because I'm working non-destructively. So my client says, hey, what would this car look like if it was green? No problem. Okay, I can come back here and I can change it to any color I want. Okay, oh, it would look cute blue. Let's make it purple, whatever color we want, but they want green. Okay, so have fun with this. It's not too difficult. If you mess up, you just throw it away. So let me know in the comments if there's any other tool or technique you'd like me to cover. I hope that was helpful, and you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Be well.